We actually, what happened and what happened where is pretty important. So as we start this book one, I want you to know, because when you realize everything happened in a specific place in Israel, it just makes it more alive. And if you ever get a chance to go there and see the places, it even becomes more alive. And the more excavations they do in Israel, the more proof it brings, and it validates Scripture. So you can see in the bottom map there where Israel is located, and where Egypt, where Mount Sinai is in that area, where Babylon, Assyria is, and we'll talk a lot more about maps as we go. Okay, any thoughts? Too much information? Mm-hmm. It may seem like a lot tonight, and I've had people tell me that before, that we cover a lot, but just understand that what we're going to do right now, we're going to outline what we're going to do for the next 13 weeks. So it is going to seem like a lot, but we're going to take it one bite at a time after tonight, okay? So we're going to use this word stages. And this you're going to want to know because it helps you outline the entire Old Testament. And the first word, the S, stands for starting. And the starting is and you have on your page there, you have the S. See the S on page 10? And under the word S, you can write starting, because that's what that S stands for. You can see the word stages go, the acrostic stages go down the page, left-hand side of your page. And the S stands for starting. So write starting underneath the S. And then there are 4 events that happen during the starting period. Creation, you can just write these in that first box. Under events and men, right? And that first box is starting. There's 4 major events in this chunk of time. Four major events: the creation, the fall, and the flood, and the tower. And we will spend time next week talking about creation and the fall. But those are the 4 major events. God created the world in Genesis, and we'll be talking about that. And then it got to the point where man was bad, and God destroyed the earth, then with a flood. And then after that was when they built the Tower of Babel. So those are the big 4 events during that time. And if you want a time frame, it's somewhere about 0 to 2000 BC. And if you want to know where this is found, the next box over to the right, it's Genesis 1 to 11. And then the next box to the right is people to know. Obviously, Adam and Eve would be a couple people that would be alive during that time. Seth would be a very important person during that time. Of course, Satan is mentioned during this. Of course, we got the flood, so Noah's going to be in it as well. And then also Enoch. Enoch was very important. Nimrod would be there because Nimrod had to do with the Tower of Babel. So all of those people we'll be talking about in the weeks to come. But the starting is very important. We have 11 chapters to go over this, and when you think about what we're talking about here in this period of time, we're talking. If you look at, you don't have to get your Bible out, and I'll show you in mine. But if you go to chapter 11 in the Bible and start with Genesis chapter 1, this is what we got. See it? That's 2,000 years, right? So we don't have much. We don't have much at all. We don't have a lot of information about what happened during that time. People always have a lot of questions about, well, what happened, but we don't have all that information. But that information is not that important, because the Bible is a story about salvation. It's a story of God creating mankind. Mankind fell, sin entered the world, and then God needed to put something into place in order to rescue man. So the Bible is the story of Jesus Christ, and the Old Testament points to Christ. That's what it does. The Old Testament points to Christ, and I think you'll see that more and more. The Hebrew people or the Jewish people, there's a lot that we can learn from. They're God's people. There's no question about that. No matter what, they're God's people. When they finally rebelled against God and were at their very worst, God allowed Jerusalem to be destroyed in 586 BC and completely leveled by the Babylonians. And then 70 years later, the Persians come in, conquer the Babylonians, and God allowed them to go back to Israel, and they started rebuilding the temple. Ezra went back, Zerubbabel went back, and they started rebuilding the temple, and then Nehemiah went back and rebuilt the walls around Jerusalem. But they were under the control of another government. They didn't own the land anymore. They had the right to it because God gave them the land when Joshua went in and conquered it. They finally got it back in May of 1948 when the United Nations gave them their land back. They got their land back after 2,500 years. Just unbelievable. But they're God's people. They're still God's people. And most of them are not obedient to God today. They're still God's people. And God's going to pour out His Holy Spirit on them at the end time, and many of them will get saved. But today they are basically rejecting Him. But they are still God's people. So this whole story of the Old Testament, it starts with His creation, the fall, the flood, and the tower, and that's the beginning. Any thoughts?
Would your date be 4,000 or 2,000 up there?
Pardon?
Wouldn't your date be 4,000 or 2,000 BC?
Yeah. Or actually, it depends on how you look at it. It could be. I'm a believer in a young Earth, so I think the Earth's only about 6,000 years old. That's my own belief, and if you don't believe that, that's fine. I'll allow you to be wrong. You know, and people think, well, how did, if you read what all the environmental people or the geologists or whatever say, they say, no, Indiana, Illinois, that was all the bottom of the ocean at one time, and it took this many millions of years for this to happen. But you got to remember, when God created everything in Genesis, everything He created was mature. That makes sense? When He created Adam, he wasn't a baby. He was a full-grown man. When He created different things, they were created. He put them in place. He didn't create a baby elephant and wait for it to grow up. He created an elephant, right? Everything He created, the world He created was mature. So I think it's a young Earth, but that's my feeling on that. But whenever that is, 6,000, good point. Could be less, could be more. I don't think it really matters. I wasn't there, right? Not that old, right? Any other thoughts? Okay, the T stands for treaties. Treaties and tribes, or just treaties, whatever you want to do. And by the way, this board here does not have spell check. Okay, and I really suck at spelling, so you're gonna get what you get. So, all right, just so you know. Okay, treaties and tribes. This is an important period of time because this is when Israel became the nation, and God made treaties with them. He created the tribes and the 12 tribes of Israel, and it's just a very, very important time. And as there were 4 events, there are 4 men. The first one is Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. Is that right? ISAAC, yeah. Those are very important people in the Old Testament. Very important. Of course, Abraham was the father of the Jews, and he's like the most important man to the Israelites today. Would be Abraham. So, and we're looking at a time period of about 2000 to about 1400 BC. And don't forget, we're headed towards 0. Remember? We're headed towards 0, so we're going down. Back at 2000 was what we see in the first of Genesis, and then we go to 1400. And as we get on to the next section, we'll drop, because eventually we're going downhill till we're going to 0, to the birth of Christ, and then we're going upwards till 2024 today. So that's where we're headed. Where it's found is in Genesis 12 to 50. So this period of treaties and tribes is over a lot of chapters. There's a lot written about that in the Old Testament, and it's just one of the very interesting periods of time. Who would we know during that time? Well, these 4 men. That would be pretty important. Any thoughts? Okay, the A then in the word stages stands for advancement. Advancement. And these are kind of using the same letters. Exiting Egypt. These are 4 events, by the way. Wandering in the wilderness. Conquering Canaan. I never can remember how to spell that. And then Jewish judges. This is a very, very interesting period of time, and it's a period of time that is about 1400 to about 1000, and BC, obviously. And this is found basically from Exodus to Judges. And this is actually a pretty long period of time as far as things happening in Israel. Basically, I mean, you understand, I mean, you know that Israel is at the end of Genesis. Joseph moves his family of 70 to Egypt, and over a period of time, God blesses them, and they become a lot of people, a whole lot of people, and they become slaves. They're in bondage for over 400 years. Actually, it's like 430 years they're in bondage, and then God calls Moses to bring them out of Egypt. So, and how many of you have seen the movie 10 Commandments?
This sounds vaguely familiar.
How many have seen it? Actually seen it?
Something that my grandparents played for me in their car.
Okay. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's It'll come to me in a minute. I sent somebody to get it.
With the actor?
Yeah.
Charles.
Charlton Heston. There you go. See, he beat the guy coming back. I have a guy in my brain. I send him to go find stuff. Anyway, Charlton Heston plays in the movie, and it's pretty well done. It's pretty accurate. It's long. It's pretty long, but watch that, and that'll. I don't think there's anything out of there. I mean, they got to make up some stuff to fill the story, but I don't think there's anything that contradicts Scripture. But Moses brings the people out of Egypt. They send the 10 spies in, right? Or the spies in, 12 of them. 10 of them come back and say, we can't do it. Caleb and Joshua is the only two that say we can do it. And so God's upset with them. They wander in the wilderness for 40 years till everybody dies. Everybody that's over 20 years old dies in the wilderness. And then you've got a whole new group of people, and they're young. They're all young because they all grown up in the wilderness. And they go in and they start conquering Canaan under the leadership of Joshua. And then over a period of time, God appoints judges to rule. And the period of the judges is about 330 years. It's a long time. And the judges some of them are good, some of them are bad. It's kind of a spiraling effect because it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. So that's what happens during all that period of time. Some people to know during that time would be obviously Moses, as he brings them out of Egypt, Aaron, the first high priest. And if you ever need me to slow down, because sometimes I know you guys can write really fast, so I talk really fast. So Aaron would be one. Joshua, of course, Caleb, and then all the judges. There's several judges that are during that period of time. Okay, that's the advancement. Any thoughts? Okay, the next stage is glory. And by the way, this is how my mind works, but this this is the way we'll break down the word stages. The starting has 4 events. Treaties and tribes has 4 men. Advancement has 4 events. Glory has 3 men. Erosion has 3 events. And servitude has 3 men. So it's 4, 4, 4, 3, 3, 3. 4 events, 4 men. 4 events, 3 men. 3 events, 3 men. So if you think of it that way, that can help you overview the whole thing. So this glory, what we have during this time is we have 4 people. We have Saul. We have Solomon. Well, actually David's in there first. Saul, David, and Solomon. And this is a very important period of time. And if you're looking for a time frame, it's about 1,000 and kind of to about 900 BC. So it's a pretty long period of time. And there are several places that you can find this. 1st and 2nd Samuel is one particular place you can find it. 1 Kings 1 through 11 tells this story as well. 1 Chronicles, and I think that's Chronicles. Yeah, pretty much the whole book of Chronicles. And then 2 Chronicles. And that's basically just chapters 1 to 9 in 2 Chronicles. But there's a lot of things recorded over a period of time. And this is just really a fun time to to read all this stuff, if you've never studied, like Chrissy and I right now, we're going through 1 Samuel at home. So we've been going through this whole thing when Samuel gets called, and now we're at the point where Saul's after David. You know, he's thrown his javelin at him 3 times, and now it's to the point where Saul's mad at him, and Saul's son Jonathan is helping David get information, and David is now took off towards the Engedi to get away from Saul. But this period of time is called the glory, and it's called the glory for a reason. If you ask any Jew alive today, what's the most wonderful time in the history of Israel? It is this period right here. It is 120-year period of time. Each one of these guys reigned as king 40 years. And this was the glorious time of all in Israel. Not so much because of Saul. He was the first king, but God rejected him because he did a lot of bad things, basically. He started out by sacrificing when he shouldn't have. He didn't have the right to do that. Samuel was supposed to be doing that, and Samuel didn't come at the time Saul thought he should, so he sacrificed to God, and God rejected him at that point. And it got worse after that. But David was appointed king at a very young age, and he actually was a fugitive for 10 years. He ran for his life from Saul for 10 years. You know, sometimes you think, and he was appointed king at the beginning. And, you know, you think, why doesn't God answer my prayer, or why do I have to keep going through this? He was literally appointed king by Samuel, and he had to wait 10 years and run for his life, live in the desert, live in caves. Literally, Saul was after him. But Saul, David, and Solomon are the only 3 kings that ever ruled all of Israel, ever. After Solomon, the kingdom split. Like I was telling you a little bit ago, we'll go over all of that when we get to it. But this is an exciting period of time, and it's the glory period for Israel because King David was highly remembered in Israel. Of course, Abraham is the father of the Israelites. Moses is regarded as the great deliverer. David is the great king. Samuel's a great prophet. Elijah's a great prophet. But the time of David and then the time of Solomon was the time of great wealth, when they had all kinds of money. God had richly blessed them like no other place had ever been blessed. So, and then it fell apart after that. But these 3 guys, each reigned 40 years, 120-year period of time. This is the glory stage. And that's why we call it G as the glory stage. Any thoughts on that? And by the way, these were the only 3 kings ever to reign, like I said, and rule all of Israel. The next king that reigns and rules all of Israel will be Christ when he gets back. So those are the only 3. Okay, the next stage is the E, and the E stands for erosion. Once they're at their height and God has blessed them, what do people do? They turn their back, right? Yeah.
Question with the people to know.
Oh,
for the
people to
last
know.
one.
Good point. Saul and David, Solomon, those 3. Also Samuel. Another one to know during that time that you'd be familiar with would probably be Bathsheba. There's other ones too, like Nathan the prophet would be one to know. So Saul, David, Solomon, Samuel, Bathsheba, maybe Nathan. Thank you for reminding me of that. So the E stands for erosion, and in this book they use 3 words that I don't use. Basically what this period does, and I'll give you these 3 words and then I'll give you mine, okay? The first one is divided. That's the first event that happens under erosion, so you can write that in that box. The second event is dispersed, and the third event is deported. And at some point, Denny changed these, and he didn't call me and ask me what I thought for some reason. But this is what I prefer to use. What happens here is the nation splits. The nation actually splits in half.
That's where Judah and Benjamin are on the lower half, and the other tribes are on.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Yep. Good thought, Holly. So they split. It's about 933 BC when this happens. And the second thing that happens is the north falls. And that is about 721 BC. And the third thing that happens is the south falls. And that is 586 BC. All of these are important dates. And of course, we're going down. So when Israel falls, and let me just give you a little bit more information about that. This is a split, okay? So you have the nation of Israel, and if you look at a map of Israel, you got the Dead Sea down here, and you got this goes up to the Sea of Galilee, and Jerusalem's right here, just about right there. And basically the nation splits in half. And you've got 10 tribes that go north, and you got 2 tribes that go south. So
that's Judah?
Yeah, Judah and Benjamin are the 2 tribes. And Benjamin's really small. It's a small tribe. Judah just kind of swallows it up. But Judah is this whole area down here. Is what we call Judea. That whole area is called Judea, and it's very desert-like. I mean, there's nothing. You literally get to the edge of Jerusalem, and it's wilderness. I mean, in every direction. And the further south you go, I mean, it's all bad. And I've been all over the whole thing. And actually, where all the fighting is going on now is over here. Is down below. That's the Gaza Strip where all the fighting is going on today. That whole area is called Judea, and the middle area, in this area here, is called Samaria. And then the upper area that's kind of the middle area, but in the top area is called Galilee. But basically, you have this major split right here in the middle, and the northern 10 tribes, they make Samaria the capital, and the city of Samaria, which is up in this area close to Sychar, is where the capital of the northern 10 tribes, and then Jerusalem is the capital of the lower 2 tribes. So they split. Rehoboam's the king down here after Solomon, and then Jeroboam is the king to the north. And then what happens is the nation comes in, that they split in 933. Then the north falls. The Persians come in and destroy the 10 tribes to the north, and they are what's considered the lost 10 tribes of Israel. Because what they do when they come in, and if you looked at a much smaller map of Israel, like Israel, the Dead Sea is there, Sea of Galilee's here, and up here, over here, you got the Persian Gulf, where the Gulf War was. This is the 2 rivers, like the Garden of Eden, and be in this area, which is Iraq today. Egypt is over here. And what they do is when they come in, they take the father there, they take the mother there, they take the kids, they split the family. And they do the same thing with the government. The first thing they did when Jerusalem fell in 586 BC was they came in, and King Nebuchadnezzar, the first thing he did was take all the royalty, which one of the royalty was Daniel. Daniel was just a boy at the time, but they took all the royalty because it disrupts the whole government system, and you can't get reorganized then. You just couldn't do it. I mean, today we dream about somebody blowing up Washington, and it's not really a bad dream. But how would you get reorganized after that? I mean, who's the boss? You know what I mean? So they cut the head off the snake, and then they come back again and take more people, like more of the skilled people. And then the third time they come back, they take common people. But the Northern Kingdom falls. The families are split apart. And you got to remember, for the Jews, it's very important that history is everything. Because if you remember, they got land based on what tribe they were part of, right? Each tribe got a portion of land. So the tribe of Judah got land down around Jerusalem. Well, in your family, whoever you are, whatever Jewish person you are, in your family, you got land divvied out to you in your family when Joshua gave Judah this hunk of land. That hunk of land then was given out to the different major families. Well, there's what's called the year of Jubilee, which is every 50th year. You could sell your land, but at the 50th year, you got that land back. So if you sell it on year 1, you could probably get a lot out of it. If you sell it on year 49, you're not going to get much because you're going to get it back the next year. So you got your land based on the fact that you could prove you were a Jew and what tribe you belonged to. So records were absolutely everything. Just like today. I mean, you get to prove you're owner of your land because you have the deed to it or the title to it. For the Jewish people, it was your who you were a descendant from and what your name was and what tribe you belonged to. And so that was very, very important. And you belong to a tribe based on your father. You're a Jew based on your mother. So you can be a Jew, but if your mom marries a Gentile, you don't have a tribe. You can be a Jew, you're not a full Jew. You're just partial Jew, and your mom was married to a Gentile, you don't have a tribe. If your dad's a Jew, but he marries a Gentile, you can be of the tribe of whatever, tribe of Judah, but you're not a full Jew because your mom's not a Jew. So in order to get your land back and to maintain your family, the importance of your family, your mom has to be a full Jew and your dad has to be a full Jew, and you are a Jew according to the tribe of your dad. That make sense? So when they disperse all these people, all the men go up here, the women go that way, and after a period of time they marry into Gentile cultures, and those 10 tribes are gone. They're gone. And in Matthew, we have Jesus' genealogy. In Luke, we have Mary's genealogy, which are super important because they point exactly to the credentials and the pedigree of who those two people are. In 70 A.D., Titus Pacian, the general of Rome, destroyed Jerusalem, and when he did, he destroyed all the Jewish records. There's not a Jew today that can prove what tribe they belong to. And to be the Messiah, you had to be able to prove your lineage. And so the Messiah could not have come after 70 AD, all a part of God's plan. So and the Jew today might say, yeah, I'm an ancestor of the tribe of Judah, and they're probably right, because they're going to keep that information in their family, but they can't prove it, because all the records were destroyed in 70 AD. When Titus Vespasian destroyed Jerusalem. So those 10 tribes fell, and then there were 2 tribes, and you notice it was quite a while. It was from 721 to 586 until God said, finally, they've had enough. And when Nebuchadnezzar came in 586 BC, he destroyed Jerusalem, and that was Solomon's temple, the magnificent temple, and everything that he had was completely leveled, completely. And then it didn't get rebuilt again then until the 300s, when finally, the temple, a tabernacle got rebuilt some years later. But it wasn't really until Herod became king that he expanded the Temple Mount. And if you remember on Sunday, I showed you pictures of the Temple Mount as 14 football fields. Herod expanded that to a much bigger area to please the Jews. And so that was the Temple Mount in Jesus' day. But those are the three things that happen in the erosion. And it's erosion. It's what we understand to be erosion. They were blessed in the glory stage. They turned away from God. They were disobedient. The north was way more disobedient. They had about, 19 or 20 kings, and they were all bad. And the southern kingdom had just a few less kings. A couple of them were pretty good, like Hezekiah was really good. But then finally God got to the point where he said, enough's enough. And when Jerusalem fell in 586 BC, Jeremiah was the prophet. And Jeremiah was telling the people, repent, repent, repent. But even if you do, God's not going to stop now. Jerusalem's going to be destroyed. And who would have imagined that Jerusalem had ever been destroyed? This is God's temple. This is where God himself resided, in the Holy of Holies. And but it was destroyed.
Can I ask you a question?
Huh?
So the southern kingdom, Judea, those two tribes were Judah and
Benjamin.
Levi? Oh, Benjamin.
Mhm.
Benjamin. Okay.
Levites weren't a tribe. They weren't
Okay.
considered a tribe.
Okay.
Mhm.
I mean, I knew they didn't. The Levites didn't get.
Right.
So they are not one of the Levites are not one of
12
because
tribes.
They're
and
clergy.
neither is Joseph.
Okay.
Joseph's two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, were two of the 12 tribes.
Okay.
But Joseph himself wasn't a tribe,
Gotcha.
and the Levites weren't a tribe.
So it's Benjamin. This
And
was the
Judah.
second one, Judah and Benjamin.
Benjamin's
Okay.
really small.
Yeah.
And if you remember when Saul became king, he had a lot of humility, and he said, "Who am I?
Yeah.
I belong to the smallest tribe.
Yeah.
I'm the least of my family's the least of the smallest tribe, and I'm the least of my family." You know, and God appointed him king. But that's what God does, right? He always takes the least of the least, but Saul blew it. But yeah, it was Benjamin and Judah are the two tribes to the south. And we'll talk about the tribes when we get there, and hopefully you'll get to know them. But this is all the Jewish history. This is God doing. He wanted to bless the Israelites. I mean, in the glory stage, he was in the temple, right? And they blew it. They blew it. They blew it when they got to the promised land, and they didn't have the faith to go into the promised land. And all that generation wandered for 40 years and died. Then Joshua got them in. They took over. They built the temple. Saul blew it, but then David was a godly man, and then Solomon built the temple at that point, and then they blew it again. So when you're talking about King Solomon being about the year 1000, and then in 933, 70 years later, now the nation's destroyed. It's split in half, and then the north falls and the south falls. So that's the erosion stage. And we have till 8 o'clock, so we got a half an hour yet. Any other thoughts? This time period, if you're looking at it, it's about 900 to 586. That's the time period. If you want to know where to find it, would be 1 Kings 12 to 22, all of 2 Kings, and then 2 Chronicles 10 to 36. And some people to know during that time is a couple I mentioned. Rehoboam is during that time. So is Jeroboam, because they are the two that took over the north and south as kings. Ahab would be a good one to talk about, and his lovely wife Jezebel. You've heard of her, right? I talked to a lady one time, and her name was Jezebel, and I thought her parents must never have read the Bible. You know, it's like, who would name their kid that? So, any thoughts? Like I said, it seems like a lot now, but we're going to take this one bite at a time, okay? Okay, the next stage then is servitude. That's what the S is. Servitude. And this particular stage has 3 men. Just like the G, E, and S all have 3. Zeru, how's that spelled? B A B E L E L. Zerubbabel. You ever heard of Zerubbabel before?
Wasn't that
What?
Daniel's name before they changed it?
No. It was very similar to that, though. Yeah. Yep. Zerubbabel was the first one that went back and started working on the temple, and so he's a very, very important person. Ezra is important, and then Nehemiah. And the time frame for this is about 586 to Christ. And then Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther are the 3 books. Is it Sther? Is that right? Okay. And the people to know would be those same people, Zerubbabel, Ezra, and Nehemiah. And the servitude is really an important period of time. And actually, this servitude period of time, we can say it's 586 to Christ, but it really is to 1948. Really, when you think about it. So this servitude period of time, you got to remember that when Israel fell here at 586 BC, they did not own their land until 1948. That's that 2,500 year period of time. So, I mean, America is what? 350 years old? I mean, we're not very old. I mean, they're almost 10 times, but they, what we are. But the servitude period of time, when they were taken captive in 586 BC, it was 70 years after that God allowed them to start returning back. Zerubbabel came back first and started working on the temple, and then Ezra comes back. Ezra is kind of like a cheerleader. He comes back and encourages the people, and they ended up getting a synagogue built. And that synagogue stood for a long, long time after that. Ezra was alive. He's important because he is the one that's credited for putting the Old Testament together as we have it today. So very important person. And then Nehemiah, if you know about Nehemiah, Nehemiah was the one that was a cupbearer before the king. You know what a cupbearer is? He gets to taste the king's food, which is a really great job because you get to eat a lot of good stuff, you know. But if somebody's trying to poison the king, you're the first to die. So, and he went before the king, and the king asked him why he was so upset, and he said, because my nation, you know, and in that day, you got to remember, in that day, the walls around the city were kind of like the identity, the national identity of the city. And so he goes back and starts building the walls, and then builds them in 52 52 days. And actually, not this time, but last time Christy and I were in Israel a few years ago, they had unearthed a whole section of the wall where Nehemiah built, and we got to see that. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, they built a wall around the city, and Israel wasn't really large at that time. It wasn't a massive city by any means, but the wall was important because you have to keep. That's how you protect the city in those days. So very important. So those three people are the important people during the servitude time, and then at the end of that, basically is we get to the end of that, and then we kind of jump into the New Testament. So, any thoughts? Any of that? And there's a little rhyme or little thing at the bottom of page 11 if you want to try to remember what these are. But if you can remember the word stages and then remember the starting, treaties and tribes, advancement, glory, erosion, servitude, and remember the main events, you've literally got the whole Old Testament, because it all happens on that in that section. And if you turn back to that one page in your book, back to page 8, you'll see where some of that fits in. You'll see where the books are that you filled in the blanks. Like if you look at the servitude period, it's that period of time before Christ comes. And there's a lot of things that happen in there that we didn't mention tonight. I mean, we'll talk about the Maccabees. We'll talk about Alexander the Great, happened around 300, and what he did. Very amazing military man. So we'll talk about him. We'll talk about what happened after Alexander the Great died. He had 4 generals take over, and those 4 generals ruled basically everything that he had conquered, and they were not good men. 2 of them hated each other, and one was north of Israel and one was south, and they would come to Israel and fight. And one of them was called Antiochus Epiphanes. He was actually not one of the direct generals under Alexander, but another descendant down. And he was a type of Antichrist that's very important to know about, because he thought he was God. In fact, his name is Antiochus, and they called him he made people call him Antiochus Epiphanes, which means the Great One. Can you imagine making people call you that? There was another word, I can't think what it is now, in the Greek. It sounds like Epiphanes, but it's just a little bit different sounding, and it means the crazy one. And that's what people called him behind his back. But you do that on, you're not going to have a head much longer if he hears you say it. He actually went into the temple and slaughtered a pig on the altar in the Jewish temple, stuffed pig meat down the throats of the priests and killed them by doing that. And then he sold the priesthood, because whoever had control of the priesthood had control of the money, because people would donate money. And that happened 250 maybe to 300, somewhere in that time frame. So by the time you get to the time of Christ, you can understand why the leaders in Israel weren't too godly. The priesthood had been sold at different times, and sometimes it made a little resurrection to come back to the Levites, but it's just a time period of, it was 400 years of silence, because Malachi was the last prophet before John the Baptist showed up, and there were 400 years of silence. The Maccabees happened during that time. So, yeah.
How can a priesthood be sold? Who
what?
owned it? A priesthood. How can it be sold?
Because whoever has the power and the right to control the temple has it's in the Jewish system, like the Jewish system that Moses set up before there were kings. The Levites were literally the ones in charge. They were the priests, but they were also in charge because God was king, and so it was a theocracy, because theo means God. So it was a theocracy that was in charge of Israel. When they became kings, then it was a monarchy where the king was in charge. If the people's in charge, it's called democracy. But when all chaos breaks loose and nobody's in charge, then it eventually went back to the priests being in charge. And when they're in charge, they're the largest group. People don't want to follow God, but at the same time, in the Israelite culture, they try to follow God in the sense, and maybe this isn't making sense, but like the Maccabees were a very powerful family. They were a godly family, but they were very, very powerful. And so that whoever's in charge of that, whoever has the most power and has control of the temple, has money, because people put their offerings in the temple. I mean, you go to the temple, you put your money in, and you have control over the main thing in the Jewish culture, which is worship. Even though they might not be worshiping correctly, you know what I mean? Like the Pharisees, for example, they bragged to Jesus, we pay a tenth of all this stuff, Well, they put that money in the temple treasury, but their hearts were far from God. But they thought by putting it in, they were doing the right thing, and God would love them no matter what they did on the outside. They were. That answer your question?
Who would they sell it to?
Huh?
Who was it sold to?
Well, whoever would buy it, whoever would give him money.
Wow, that's
Oh, good heavens! Think of his name. I just told it to you a minute ago. Epiphanes, Antioch Epiphanes. When he sold the priesthood, it was basically who's got money, and people have. It's like every culture. Whoever has the money rules, And so when they have control of the temple and the temple grounds, and they control the sacrifices, they.
So he was a
rule.
king, right?
He was.
And
he was one of the 4 generals of Alexander the Great. Yeah.
Was he? Oh, so he was.
He was
under
not directly under Alexander the Great, but he came a couple down. But he was the one.
But he was a Jew, right?
No,
Okay.
no, he wasn't a Jew.
That's the disconnect
Yeah,
for me. I'm trying to
his name was Antioch Epiphanes. He was the type of Antichrist at the time, because he's the one that went into the temple
desecrated
desecrated the temple, dishonored God,
and that was 300-ish BC.
yeah, around that time, 250 to 300.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll get to all that. Okay. We won't get to that until next spring, until we get to the end of the Old Testament. But we'll spend time talking about all that. It's very, very interesting.
This is going to fill in a whole lot of holes.
Yeah, it does. It does, because I think what we do is we don't understand the overarching picture.
Yeah.
And I think people, the Old Testament, I just love the Old Testament, because when you follow and understand what God's put into place, I mean, the whole sacrificial system was put into place to help people realize something has to die for your sin. Something has to die, and it's only temporary until the Messiah comes and he dies. But it's all to show people there's consequences for sin, serious consequences. And actually, when a man bought the lamb and brought it to the altar, the priest held it. The man put his head on top of the lamb, and the man slit its throat. I mean, people can't kill anything today, but you had to slice the lamb's throat. It was a warning to you that something had to die, and God accepted that lamb's death, just like he did when the Passover, when they spread the lamb, on the doorpost. God accepted that for now, until Christ would come and pay for it later. But it was all the seriousness of sin. And literally, the Levites, priests, were literally just butchers. They butchered sheep morning and night. They would have been covered with blood. That's what they did, again, day after day after day. That's what they did. And then when you have events like the Passover, when they have thousands of lambs slain. I mean, in Jesus' day, right after Jesus' time, some of the first century historians like Josephus said that there were 250,000 lambs killed that week.
Man, where did all that blood go?
That blood runs out of the temple, down to the Kidron Creek, and right past the Garden of Gethsemane and down. And it's very likely that when Jesus was arrested in the garden, he stepped over blood going up to the temple, and it would soon be his. And God's got everything immaculately and perfectly put in place. And the whole Old Testament, like I said, it points to Christ. All of it does. Every bit of it. And when you understand all of that, it just makes you're just in awe that God has put up with, always put up with for so long. But everything had a purpose. Yeah.
What did they do with all the carcasses of the sacrifices?
They had things they did with them. They would burn some on the altar. The priests also got some of the meat to eat, and obviously they couldn't eat all of it.
Right.
And in times of ungodly, they would sell it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there refrigeration?
No.
It's hot
Nope.
there, isn't it?
You eat it today. Tomorrow it's not going to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll pass on that. Lamb chops. There's no leftovers in that day, which would have been really cool. You know, no leftovers. So,
Just put some salt in it, you'll be fine.
yeah. Well, you know, that's what they used to do. They'd put the ham down in a salt tank or a barrel, had salt water in it, you know. I know my dad told me Mom would tell him to go downstairs and get a hunk of ham, you know, and he'd take the rope and pulley and pull the ham up out of the salt water and then slice off a piece and then lower it back down. So, our refrigerator, electricity goes off today. Nobody's got anything, right? Unless you got a generator. Literally, I mean, and that's a scary thing because today, all they got to do is knock out a few power stations and you're not, I mean, you might have a generator, but 3 days from now, you're not going to have gas either. We got nothing. So you might want to buy some extra salt. You know, just
Or some canned stuff.
canned stuff. There you go. Yeah.
Jerky cure.
But if you look then on page look on page 12 in your book, and my book's just a little bit different than yours, but I think it's about the same. On page 12 at the top it says starting, creation, and fall, and then it says period 1 starting is found in Genesis 1-11. There's much written about this period. There's less written about this period than any other. This may well be the period that it tells the most time. And then it says prepare for class, read Genesis 1-5. That's all you do. You don't fill anything out in the book at all. All you do is read Genesis 1-5. You can write notes in your Bible, or if you've got a question, bring it and ask it anytime you want. And then we will get started on the events of the creation, and we'll talk about the young earth, the old earth that we were talking about a little bit ago. We'll talk about the fall of man and some of the curses that happened along with the fall. And that's all we'll get to. And then in week 3, we're going to talk about the flood in the tower. So we go over it pretty quick, but hopefully it'll be in enough detail that it'll make sense to you. But and I'll try to make it as fun as we can. I'm going to have fun. If you don't want to have fun, that's your problem. But we're going to have fun, right? And we're going to learn this stuff. I think God's happy when we're studying His Word, and we're gonna get through this one bite at a time. And so write down questions if you come, and next week we'll get started as soon as we can on page 12. So all you got to do is read Genesis 1-5.
Okay.
So I encourage you to do it. And if I let you out early, 9 minutes early, you won't tell anybody, right? I got a reputation to uphold here, so.
I got
I usually
some
go over.
stuff.
Is that what it
You
is?
did it so you could put me to work, didn't you?
Banking time.
Do what?
I said you just let it out early so you could put me to work, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
See your mother-in-law. Oh, okay.
All right.
You could have
Yeah.
watched, if she left her.
Every day's a little better.
It is.
You know?
Do you have to stretch a lot?
I said if she left her time, you could have watched movies.
I do stretch a good
I
bit,
know, I'm
but
saying if she left her, no.
like push it right towards just starts to hurt a little bit.
Are you
and
doing
I
any
stop.
kind of therapy at all?
No, just walking. But I was making a mistake.
That way, anyway, Monday night, Wednesday night.
I was walking without the cane,
Weekends?
and I was wondering why in the world. I told her, I said, I feel like I'm going backwards. My pain's increasing.
You leaning a
I
little
was
bit?
putting too much on it because I wasn't using the cane. I bailed out on the cane too early, but
He wasn't using it properly either.
I wasn't using it properly.
You wanna
It wasn't
stand up
working.
straight. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, when they gave me physical, the physical therapist showed me how to use the walker, how to walk upstairs, and back downstairs, and all that. But what she didn't show me is how to walk with a cane. I've never used a cane.
Yeah.
So I was using the cane on the same side.
See you next, well, see you Sunday.
So I was using the cane like this on the same side as my bad leg.
Yeah.
I'm not getting a lot out of this. So the heck with that. I started using it. Well, she ran into a friend of ours walking in the neighborhood who's a
I was
physical
thinking like,
therapist.
yeah, she knew.
And she was telling her that I was not doing that great. You know, that I was kind of going backwards. And she said he's not using any assistance. Oh, no. So it wasn't healing properly. I wasn't allowing it. So, but she told her how to. So I parallel my bad leg with it, and it works great.
I don't want to see myself on there.
That means that you have your fingers surgery.
See, I just moved on.
You guys put a lot into this.
I know you did the whole clearance thing.
I guess I can shut this off, huh?